Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we are starting a series on the 8 key parts of money management. These help my husband and I get our financial house in order. We will look at each of these briefly today, and then hopefully you will subscribe, follow along as we dive into them more deeply in the weeks to come. Money management isn't just knowing how to balance your checkbook or see what your account balances are or pay a bill. There's a lot more to it than that. It really boils down to a set of habits and routines that, when put into practice, will help you take control of your finances. Think of it like getting healthy. There are a lot of different components to overall health, whether it's what you're eating, how often you're eating, how much you're eating, your exercise, what types of exercise, when do you exercise, what vitamins might you take, or preventative treatments that you would seek out, what kind of sleep are you getting? There's a lot of different components that lead to that overall picture of health. And financial health is much the same way. So why should you listen to this random lady on the internet? That is a good question. I am Sarah. I'm a certified financial educator, and it is these 8 key money management principles that my husband and I used over 13 years ago to get debt-free, stay debt-free, and we did it all on one income. Okay, the first key part of money management is you need to know your financial reality. When we are struggling with our finances, when we know things aren't good, we tend to stick our head in the sand, and I'm speaking from experience here. We need to face the facts, look at the picture overall, and know exactly where we stand, because if we don't do that, we are not going to be motivated to make the changes that we need to make. It's time to face reality and get an honest picture of your financial situation. This is key. So what does this look like in practice? This means going to all of your accounts and looking at everything. You need to see what you have. You need to see what you owe, all of your bills and expenses, the ones that are the same, the ones that vary. You need a list of everything so you can see how much is coming in and how much is going out, what you're owing right now, how much debt you have, all of it. And it can be painful, I know, but it is so important that you know where you stand. If you're married, it is so important that you and your spouse are on the same page and you do this together. You can be there for each other to help yourselves through the pain. It is not easy, but it is necessary. I have a dear friend who always says you need to just rip the Band-Aid. This is a rip the Band-Aid situation. It might be painful. It's probably going to be painful in some ways, but you need to just do it. Get to ripping the Band-Aid. All right, now that you've done the hard part and you have a clear financial picture of where you stand, it's time for our next key part of money management, and that is you need to make a budget. Now, a budget is not the same as logging into your checking account and looking to see how much money you have left or paying a bill. A budget is a clear, personalized, detailed plan for what you're going to do with any money that crosses your path. Now, there are many different ways to do a budget, and you have to find what works for you. There are software programs and apps. Good old pen and paper is what I did for hundreds of budgets before I switched over to a more digital version, but you have to find what works for you. It's kind of like our health analogy from earlier. When people want to know how they should exercise, when are you going to actually do it? That's the best time or way to exercise, is the thing that you're actually going to do. And it's the same for a budget. So figuring out what works for you, kind of what speaks to you as a budgeting tool. And you might start with one thing and then change to something else. That's what I did. But you got to figure out a way to get started. There's lots of different ways to budget, not just tools. So you might do a reverse budget, or my favorite, which is the zero-based budget. There's budgeting that kind of is based on percentages. X number of percentage you spend on housing, X number of percentage you spend on wants or needs. And I've never really loved that way because I don't feel like it's tailored enough to just really being detailed. And for some people, those percentages just don't work for where you're at in life. But you have to find what kind of a budget plan you like, that resonates with the way you think about money, and that you're actually going to stick to. Most of us have money that comes in every month, and then we get the bills paid, and then there's some money left over that sits in the account, and it just kind of goes to whatever. You need to have a better plan. That's why I like the zero-based budget. It gives every single dollar that crosses your path something to do, whether it's going to go to paying for your mortgage or buying food or paying off debt or going into savings. Every dollar is given a purpose. It's told what to do. You're telling it what to do so that none of it just kind of flitters away, which is what can happen when we just sort of pay our bills and let money sit in the account after that. Now, once you make that first budget, give yourself a lot of grace. It takes a while. It can take several budgets and maybe even more, depending on how your income comes in, if it's consistent or variable. It can just take a while to really get the feel for a budget. You're gonna do one, and then you're gonna realize you forgot about something that's not a regularly occurring bill, or you're gonna do one and you're gonna realize you have plans, but you've run out of money. I remember when we were first starting out, my husband and I were gonna be going away for the weekend to a conference with some friends, and we had planned ahead that we were gonna grab some sushi on the way. It was gonna be a treat. And then we sat down and did that budget before that weekend, and we had to call our friends and just say, so we're doing our budget and we're wondering if maybe instead of the sushi restaurant, we could just grab Chick-fil-A on the road. And they were wonderful. But sometimes that's just how it's gonna go. You're gonna have a plan and you're gonna have to go in and change the plan and you're gonna have to readjust. And it's actually really cool if you do have people in your life who you can share that with, who will cheer you on and who you don't feel embarrassed to say, or you shouldn't feel embarrassed. You're doing a wise thing with money. You don't feel embarrassed to tell them, like, I know we plan to do this, but my budget won't allow for that this month, so can we do this instead? That's actually a really good thing. So when it comes to doing the budget, don't give up if they're not all perfect right away. I had many a budget meeting with my husband when we started out that involved some definite tears and they were hard at first, but don't give up. You will be a budgeting pro in no time. I've done hundreds of these budgets now. I've got it down to a science. So once you've done that budget, however imperfect it is, at least you're doing it. Now is the hardest part. It's the sticking to the budget. Try not to think of a budget as restricting you and stopping you. You're the one who made that plan for the money based on your goals. So think of the budget as you're allowing yourself to do whatever you need to do that month with your money. Now, if you're in a ton of debt, you're probably just allowing yourself to pay off debt. And that's an okay thing to allow yourself to do. But later on, when you're out of debt, maybe some of that money is allowing yourself to go out to a nice dinner or allowing yourself a vacation. The point is the money is there. You're giving it jobs. You're choosing those jobs that are important to you. So don't think of it as restrictive. Think of it as almost freeing, but with some, I guess, guardrails along the side so that you can't go over the edge. You can make a budget and list your expenses all day long, but if you don't actually stick to it, you're not actually in control of your money. Okay, so the third key part of money management is now you need to tackle any debt. This is huge. You are never going to get ahead financially if you are carrying a ton of debt. Now, I do want to specify here. When I'm talking about debt here, I am talking about everything that isn't a mortgage. Mortgage is a debt, but it is a debt for something that you need to pay for, housing. It is often, for many people, cheaper than renting in a lot of situations. Although the interest rates have been on the rise lately, the historic interest rates are still really low, especially when we're comparing them to the interest rates on consumer debt we might be carrying. So for now, let's not worry about mortgage. Let's consider that an appreciating asset. Hopefully your house value is going up, so you're getting a little bit of return on that money and you need a place to live anyway. We're gonna focus instead on consumer debt that really weighs heavy, those higher interest rates. We're talking credit cards, obviously, car loans, personal loans, student loans, all of these places where your dollars you don't get to tell them what to do every month because some other outside source is telling you they need your dollars and they're getting the interest on top of that. All of that money is not staying in your hands. You don't get to tell it what to do because it has to go out there. So we want to get that debt paid off as quickly as possible. You aren't going to be able to build wealth with eyes toward the future of generosity and glorifying God with your money if you don't get to keep any of your money. You want to attack your debt with a vengeance. This is where you've done the budget. Now you see where all your expenses are, and now you can see where to trim. Where can I cut something out? Where can I do something to bring in more money? Maybe it's a little side job or you pick up some babysitting. Maybe you're selling some of the stuff that you have. Wherever you can bring in every little dollar to throw at that debt. You want to get rid of all of that consumer debt. Here at It's All His, our goal is to help you manage God's money, God's way, for God's glory. And while debt in and of itself is not a sin, the Bible is really clear that debt enslaves you. Proverbs 22:7 says, "The borrower is slave to the lender." If you want to learn more about how to pay off debt, consider subscribing to the channel because we will be talking about that a ton here because I hate debt. Okay, the fourth part of money management is setting up an emergency fund. This is key to staying out of debt. I'm willing to bet that some of you, like me, have accrued debt because you didn't have an emergency fund and something came up. Maybe it was a medical bill or a car repair or something broke at your house and you didn't have any way to pay for it, so you had to put it on a credit card and now you're paying for it with interest. These things happen to most of us, and many of us have been there. Now here I want to make a really important aside. This channel is all about glorifying God with money, so I would be remiss if I didn't remind you that if you are a Christian, you are under the grace of God. There is no financial sin or shame that cannot be overcome by the power of the gospel. So leave it all at the cross. Repent where you need to repent, and then turn to the Lord and seek his help and trust him in this debt-free journey. He will help you move forward in obedience and faithfulness and with that motivation that you need. It's way easier to ask the Lord's help than to try to do this in your own strength. All right, emergency funds are life-changing. Basically, they're a way to kind of self-insure against the unexpected things that are kind of expected. You know these things are going to happen. You're gonna have a flat tire. You are going to have to pay for a medical thing you didn't anticipate. Something's gonna break in your car. We know these things are coming, and an emergency fund helps us not need to go into debt when they do. An emergency fund actually takes something that could have been a crisis and really just turns it into more of an annoyance. Now I gotta drain my emergency fund or take money out of my emergency fund, as opposed to, oh no, now how am I gonna pay the rent or the mortgage? Oh, what are we gonna eat? What if I can't pay for my lights to stay on? It's life-changing to have that emergency fund, and incredibly freeing to know you have that money set aside. You've wisely stored it away for when the unexpected happens. An emergency fund is a must if you want to stay out of debt. Okay, the next part of money management is to make wise spending just a part of your life. It doesn't matter where you're at. If you have no debt, you still need to be wise with the money that you have. None of us has an unlimited pile of money. It means that there are limitations that must be set. So figure out how you can spend wisely on everything forever. Now, if you're a Christian like me, this is a stewardship mindset that I'm gonna stand before the Lord one day and have to give an account of what I did with the money he allowed me to store, because, like the channel says, it's all his. So spending wisely isn't something we ever stop doing. Now, what that looks like can vary. Spending wisely might mean you buy a more expensive product, but then you keep it a long time and you take really good care of it, as opposed to just something cheap and fast that's gonna fall apart or break down. Spending wisely means thinking before you make purchases, particularly big purchases. It means saving up for those big purchases, shopping around so that you know you're getting the best deal on those purchases. Spending wisely should become a way of life. That is the way that you're going to honor God with your money and also just continue growing in financial success, because you have made wise spending just a part of how you think about managing money. Our next key part of money management is insurance. You need to protect your assets. You need to protect what you have, and you need to have something in place to plan for the future beyond that emergency fund. We're talking about your homeowner's insurance or renter's insurance. What if there's a fire or some other natural disaster? Car insurance, medical insurance, disability insurance, life insurance. I know it can be hard to talk about these things because a lot of times we need these insurances when something really difficult or even tragic has happened. However, having them in place is just wise stewardship. It's a way to protect what you've been given. So insurance is a key part of money management. And it's helpful to have those insurances in place when you aren't dealing with a difficult situation, when you're not thinking emotionally about something. It's important to remind yourself these things, they could be coming, and what will you do if you have a fire, if you lose your income or your spouse's income. These things are hard to think about, but they're necessary and responsible things to think about. And they can really mean the difference between a financial upheaval that is really hard to come back from. The next key part of money management is investing. Saving for the future is huge, and it's so important. And it's one that you want to get started with ASAP, because compound interest and time are really the ticket to helping you build a nest egg that you can then use to bless others and be generous and live comfortably when you're older. Whatever goals you might have, you have to start early, and you have to be saving and investing a little bit along the way. It really is a marathon, just faithful, consistent investing. We will definitely be talking about that more here as my husband and I are starting our, what I'm calling DIY investing journey. We are no longer using a financial advisor. We are passionate and excited about this stuff, so we are going to do it ourselves. And as we're learning and doing all of that, I'll be sharing that with you here. Suffice to say, no money management plan is complete without some form of investing. All right, the next part of any money management plan is my favorite part. It is the most fun part, and that is generosity. What is the point of getting out of debt? What is the point of saving for the future? What is the point of all of that if you can't take it with you? Jesus tells us that we should store up treasure in heaven, but we're also very wise to count the cost and make a plan. So it's not wrong to save for the future. It's not wrong to invest. It's not wrong to grow a nest egg or build wealth. None of those things are unbiblical or sinful. If we have an abundance, or even if we don't, generosity is so important. Being generous with what you've been given is a blast. It is so cool to be able to see someone in need and meet that need and just do it so joyfully. If my goal is managing God's money God's way for God's glory, what greater way to glorify the giver of all good gifts than by giving to others who are in need, by showing His love and care for them, by blessing them unexpectedly and showing them how God will meet their needs and how He's going to use you to do it. It's so exciting. Start thinking about how much fun you can have by blessing others. Next week, we'll begin diving into each of these components of money management a bit more deeply. But until then, check out these videos and I will see you next time.